The most mysterious angels in the Bible. Theophany. In the Old Testament, angels are referenced 108 times. The book of Genesis recounts instances of angels intervening in the lives of Abraham and Jacob. In the book of Exodus, Moses also encountered angels during the wilderness wandering. In total, the word angels or angel appears in the book of the Law and Moses writings 32 times. The angels of God are introduced to us in the scriptures as the hosts of heaven. Angels are real beings. They are not mythical figures or opinions. They are spiritual personalities that have a physical impact. Just like the demonic world, the angelic world is also hidden. We might not be able to touch them, yet angels touch people. You cannot handle them, yet they can destroy kings. This brings us to the most mysterious angels in the Bible, the Theophany. What are the Theophany? The term Theophany in ancient Hebrew refers to wheels. The singular is often. Of course, wheels are cited several times in the Old Testament, and the Theophany can refer to normal wheels on a cart or a chariot. But of particular interest are the wheels on the throne of God, mentioned in Ezekiel's vision. Who was Ezekiel? Who was this prophet that saw this vision? Prophet Ezekiel. The name Ezekiel means El, God, is strong, or God strengthens, or may El, God, strengthen. This prophet lived during one of the most difficult times of Judah's history, namely the Babylonian exile, and this may indicate the reason for his name. During Nebuchadnezzar's conquest in 597 BC, he was one of the 10,000 prisoners captured from Jerusalem, and most likely he prophesied in Babylon to the exiles in settlements of Tel Aviv on the river Kebar. The ministry of Ezekiel was absolutely necessary for the exiles. For those who believed and gave heed to his words, there was life, but for the others, certain judgment. Ezekiel's ministry showed that God was still communicating with them, even during times of harsh judgment. Even though they would be punished, they were not abandoned. Jeremiah preached God's message in Jerusalem, while another voice preached it to the exiles in Babylon so they would be informed about God's plans. Both voices were equally strong. Ezekiel sees the Theophany. Ezekiel has been in exile when God appeared to him. God used this encounter to start Ezekiel's ministry as a prophet by showing him an astounding vision. It is hard to define the Theophany depicted in Ezekiel's vision without considering the entirety of the revelation. God chooses to open the heavens in front of Ezekiel's temporal eyes. The description of Ezekiel's inaugural vision is one of the most difficult passages to translate in the whole Old Testament. Ezekiel first tells where he was when he saw the vision. Ezekiel 1:1-4. Now it came about in the 13th year on the 5th day of the 4th month, while I was by the river Chebar, among the exiles, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's exile, the word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. And there the hand of the Lord came upon him. As I looked, behold, a high wind was coming from the north, a great cloud with fire flashing intermittently, and a bright light around it. And in its midst, something like gleaming metal in the midst of a fire. He tried to put into words something that couldn't be explained clearly. He used similes to describe it, comparing it to other things in order to give an idea of what it was like. We read the phrase, something like gleaming metal in the midst of the fire. Ezekiel notices a foreboding dark cloud of lightning and fire approaching from the north. Within the cloud, there are 4 lighted beings that shine brightly. Although the beings have the appearance of humans, they are not human in any way. Each possesses 4 different faces: 1 human face, 1 lion face, 1 ox face, and 1 eagle face. The prophet doesn't record these creatures by name in Ezekiel 1, where the recounting of his vision begins. But by chapter 10, they're identified as cherubim. Ezekiel 1:5-7. And within it there were figures resembling 4 living beings, and this was their appearance. They had human form. Each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight and their feet were like a calf's hoof, and they sparkled like polished bronze. What Ezekiel saw was real, but he had to describe it with familiar terms. Before witnessing the Theophany, Ezekiel saw creatures that later identified these creatures as cherubim. The cherubim are a group of celestial beings created by God. They are the first of the angelic hierarchy to appear in the Bible, immediately following Adam and Eve's fall from grace. We don't know Adam's reaction to witnessing those glorious cherubim for the first time in human history. Perhaps awe, fright, and wonder will come to mind. In Exodus 25, Moses was given specific and detailed instructions on how to make several articles of furniture that would be used in the tabernacle. The Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat, where God promised to meet and commune with Moses, were the first to be detailed. What did God want to go over or on top of the mercy seat? He chose representations of the cherubim in gold. What an awesome sight that must have been. The cherubim associated with the very presence of God. And here Ezekiel sees the cherubim in the presence of God. They constantly glorify God. Though artists have painted cherubim, the plural of cherub, as chubby little angelic-looking creatures, the Bible describes them as attending the throne of God and executing His will. Ezekiel 1:8-10. Under their wings on their 4 sides were human hands. As for the faces and wings of the 4 of them, their wings touched one another. Their faces did not turn when they moved, each went straight forward. As for the form of their faces, each had a human face. All 4 had the face of a lion on the right and the face of a bull on the left, and all 4 had the face of an eagle. Ezekiel noticed that each living creature had 4 faces. 1 human, possibly representing intelligence, 1 lion representing strength, 1 ox representing servitude, and 1 eagle representing loftiness. They had wings and the willingness to go wherever the Spirit went. The Lord wanted Ezekiel to understand that He is everywhere. Ezekiel may have been in a land of captivity, but he was not alone. God was with him. As believers in God, we can find comfort in the fact that He is always with us no matter where we are or what challenges we are facing. The idea that God is present everywhere gives us peace of mind, knowing that He is always with us. Ezekiel 1:11-14. Such were their faces. Their wings were spread out above. Each had 2 touching another being, and 2 covering their bodies. And each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit was about to go, they would go, without turning as they went. In the midst of the living beings, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire, like torches moving among the living beings. The fire was bright and lightning was flashing from the fire, and the living beings ran back and forth like bolts of lightning. The chariot. After seeing the cherubim, Ezekiel saw the wheels, like the chariot wheels. The best object for imagining what Ezekiel saw is a gyroscope. Ezekiel was describing something that could move in any direction without needing to turn. Keep in mind that Ezekiel was describing the indescribable. Ezekiel 1:15-21. Now as I looked at the living beings, behold, There was one wheel on the ground beside the living beings, for each of the four of them. The appearance of the wheels and their workmanship was like sparkling topaz, and all four of them had the same form. Their appearance and workmanship being as if one wheel were within another. Whenever they moved in any of their four directions without turning as they moved. As for their rims, they were high and awesome, and the rims of all four of them were covered with eyes all around. Whenever the living beings moved, the wheels moved with them, and whenever the living beings rose from the earth, the wheels rose also. Wherever the spirit was about to go, they would go in that direction, and the wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living beings was in the wheels. Whenever those went, they went, and whenever those stopped, they stopped, and whenever those rose from the earth, the wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living being was in the wheels. Ezekiel continued to describe the constant interaction between the wheels and the cherubim. Wherever the cherubim went, the wheels went. He reported that the Spirit of God manifested in all that was happening. Ezekiel was also seeing God's omniscience. The multiple eyes he saw represented God's complete awareness. He sees and knows everything. This great book begins with a vision. Ezekiel receives a revelation from God of four angelic figures. In this vision, God calls the prophet to be his spokesman and watchman to the Hebrew exiles. This vision is first of four in the book. Ezekiel describes this first vision in vivid detail. Like all effective leaders, he spoke as clearly as possible. A pastor once said, "If it's fuzzy in the pulpit, it's foggy in the pew." Ezekiel provided vision by way of analogies, then applied those visions. He communicated a picture, then shared his point. Divine visions always help a leader and the people move in the right direction. A divine vision also seems to include these components. The spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels, so that the creatures moved in whatever direction the wheels moved. It was indeed an awesome sight. The huge wheels, the living creatures, the enfolding fire, and the eyes in the rims of the wheels. What an arresting picture of the providence of God, always at work, intricately designing, never wrong and never late. What Ezekiel saw or described in this passage is difficult to visualize in its entirety. It's presumably an image of a magnificent chariot with four wheels that's bringing the throne of God. The scene gives the impression of continuous motion and activity, not only on the part of the living beings themselves, but also on the part of God's throne. The sense seems to be that the wheels and their workings could move in any direction, but there was no sense of chaos or disorder in their movements. A popular Bible commentator stated about this, "Like a bull bearing, they could move in any direction without any steering mechanism." Ezekiel 1:22-28. Now over the heads of the living beings there was something like an expanse, like the awesome gleam of crystal, spread out over their heads. Under the expanse their wings were stretched out straight, one toward the other. Each one also had two wings covering its body on one side and on the other. And I also heard the sound of their wings, like the sound of abundant waters as they went, like the voice of the Almighty, a sound of a crowd like the sound of an army camp. Whenever they stopped, they let down their wings, and a voice came from above, the expanse that was over their heads. Whenever they stood still, they let down their wings. Now above the expanse that was over their heads, there was something resembling a throne, like lapis lazuli in appearance. And on that which resembled a throne high up was a figure with the appearance of a man. Then I noticed from the appearance of his waist and upward, something like gleaming metal that looked like fire all around within it. And from the appearance of his waist and downward I saw something like fire, and there was a radiance around him. Like the appearance of the rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face and heard a voice speaking. Finally, Ezekiel saw the chamber in heaven and tried to describe the sights and sounds of the creature. Then he noticed a throne, occupied by someone with the appearance of a man. Ezekiel observed that the entity seated on the throne resembled a human, but was more akin to flames than physical matter. Just imagine the glory and the splendor that there was.